I'm Dr. Dan Turner, Head of Programming and Outreach for the Georgetown County Library System, and we welcome you to a brand new run of the FOWL First Thursday series. And we're incredibly excited to kick this series off, not with a whimper, but with a real bang, a big bang, with our special guest, Dr. Tracy Bailey. And this series, the First Thursday series, is sponsored by FOWL, the Friends of the Waccamaw Library, and they are wonderful and generous with their support on all levels. It's a volunteer, nonprofit organization, but they really keep our library going, so we're so thankful to them. If you're not a member of FOWL, please join up. They could use your help on all levels, and they're a wonderful bunch of people too, so you get to join a great organization of folks. First Thursdays series really got going under Jill Santrapietro, and I just took over that momentum and am keeping it going forward as best I can. This is a great speaker series. We focus on topics in Southern history and culture, but especially South Carolina, and even more especially in our wonderful low country, loco topics, as we like to say around here. And we've got just a perfect opportunity today, listening to Tracy Bailey talking about her novel, Riverside Blues. So she's going to tell us about that inspiration behind it. Dr. Tracy S. Bailey talking about Riverside Blues, a Gullah tale, a fascinating new novel featuring an unforgettable and emblematic heroine in Maybelline, born, quote, absent of all God's favor, but destined by the ancestors to cross over. This young woman travels from her Gullah roots in rural South Carolina on a voyage of discovery through the 1950s and 60s American South. And if you haven't got a copy yet, Tracy did tell us she's down to her last couple of boxes. So it's already sold out one run, and it's almost sold out the second run. So we'll get some ordering information for you at the end of the broadcast today. Dr. Bailey, if you don't know already, I imagine most folks around Horry, Georgetown County do know, but if you don't know, she is a native of our area, and Dr. Bailey is the founder and CEO of Freedom Readers, a literacy nonprofit that does so much great work instilling the love of reading in our next generation here. She has been a Nieman Fellow affiliate at Harvard University, and her fiction was nominated for a 2017 Pushcart Prize. So please, let's welcome in Tracy Bailey, and I will shuffle off to the left here, and we'll bring in Dr. Bailey. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning. Make no mistake about it, we are living in challenging and troubling times, as evidenced by the fact that I am delivering this talk today to an almost empty auditorium. What we had considered to be routine in January and February of this year is not possible right now. But I'm still excited to be giving this talk on my debut novel, Riverside Blues, and it's not lost on me that this particular event is special. I'm standing here in Georgetown County, where I was born and raised, and where the book gets a lot of its flavor. So that's one special aspect. And although I'm not able to sign books today or meet many of you in person after the talk to look you in the eye and thank you for supporting my art, this event is being live streamed, and people all over the country and all over the world actually can take this journey with us. To be able to open the realm of the book to an audience that far-reaching and to people from so many different walks of life and experiences is extraordinary and I want to pause right now to again thank Dan Turner and the Friends of the Waccamaw Library for this opportunity. This event is special and different, but at least one thing remains the same. I am still interested in your thoughts about Riverside Blues, and I'm eager to address your questions. You can ask them in the comment section of the live stream, and someone in the room will make sure that I hear the question. At the end of this presentation, I'll share information on how you can reach out to me to order copies of the book or just to continue the conversation. But by all means, let's connect. The slide you are viewing now is a version of the picture that you see on the cover of the novel. This gorgeous photograph was taken by my friend Shamela Gathers Barney at Harris Landing in the North Santee section of Georgetown County. She captured the very rare beauty of the river and all that it stands for: renewal, rebirth, and constant flow. I'm so happy that someone for whom I have so much respect and with whom I share Gullah roots agreed to allow me to grace the book's cover with her photography. The second slide shows what the picture looks like after a filter had been added to the photo, giving it a more dreamlike quality and accentuating the imagined aspects of the novel. Both pictures perfectly illustrate the book's title, Riverside Blues. The fictional town where the story takes place is nestled next to a river, which is featured prominently throughout the book. And the pictures also capture the element of blues with which the characters in the story contend. As my mother said often when I was growing up, every day ain't gonna be Sunday, and everything won't come on a flower bed of ease. But the blues and the title of this novel is about loss and suffering, as well as about finding joy in the middle of the struggle and finding the strength to persevere. So now let's turn our attention to the story itself. During our time together, I'll introduce you to the central character in Riverside Blues. I'll tell you about her hopes and ambitions and try to situate her story into a historical context. You will get to know her as a child and as an adult. And in the process, you'll have the chance to see the world through her eyes. You'll listen to the voice of a Black woman who represents thousands of Black women just like her, who for years have been silenced. Their stories have been taken for granted and swept into the corners of history. My novel, Riverside Blues, and today's presentation are designed to begin to change that, to praise these women, to honor them, and to bring them to the forefront so that they can speak for themselves. I do all of this because their Black lives matter and because they deserve this moment and so many moments like it in the sun. Near the end of this talk, I'll imagine what a character like Maybelline would be experiencing during these current times, what she would think of the movement for Black lives, and where she fits into the struggle now. Thus, the title of this talk, Maybelline Meets Black Lives Matter, Black Women's Fight for Freedom Then and Now. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to those who have not yet read the book and present to those who have Maybelline Smith Jackson. She is strong and resilient and beautiful and brilliant like the women who came before me. She is intuitive and brave and special, but she doesn't know this about herself for much of the novel. She must mature through her pain caused by people around her who don't value her contributions and her gifts, pain caused by a world that treats her like she is not worthy. The image that you're looking at now was captioned, "African American maid prepares a white family supper in Greenville, South Carolina, 1956, when it was featured in an issue of Life magazine, looking at how the emotionally and politically charged issue of segregation manifested itself at a time when the civil rights movement was barely in its infancy. Maybelline, the fictional character, who was born in 1940, would have been around 16 when this picture was taken. The unnamed woman in the picture is at work in the home of a white family who seem oblivious to her presence. She is wearing a uniform and preparing food while they are probably engaged in happy conversation all around her. She doesn't smile, though, and remains focused on the task in front of her. The blog where this picture was found is called Just Like Family, and the author, a woman named Felicia Furman, born in 1952, shares a few of her thoughts about the photo and the times in Greenville, South Carolina, where she grew up. In photographs that at times convey an unsettling intimacy, the photographer's work opens a window on an era that, for better and for worse, helped define 20th century America. There is courage to be found in these images, and dignity and weakness, and a cruelty that, in the guise of a patronizing benevolence, shaped the destinies of Black and white America for decades to come, and echoes in our national conversations even today. One of the things that strikes me about the photograph is that the white family's kitchen is quite modest. I remember just about everyone of any economic class in Greenville had a maid. The salaries of the Black housekeepers were sinfully low, end quote. For most of the novel, we see Maybelline as an adult, but her story doesn't begin there. I wanted to begin Riverside Blues with Maybelline as a child. This decision was made partly because of a fiction writing class I took in 2014, and partly because of what I have learned about the importance of childhood experiences on the lives of adults. I'll spend a few minutes unpacking both. The character Maybelline has a tumultuous start in life. I was prompted to think about this fictional little girl by an assignment issued by Anne Bernays, who taught fiction writing at Harvard. I happened to be in that class because I was tagging along when my husband participated in a year-long Nieman Journalism Fellowship at Harvard that started in the fall of 2013 and ended in the summer of 2014. Anne asked the writers in her class to try to write from the perspective of a 6-year-old child. I immediately thought of my mother and what life must have been like growing up in Georgetown in the 40s and 50s. Although Maybelline's character is fictitious, I do draw on the realities of my mother's era to flesh this story out. I've been asked why the book starts with violence and upheaval and bloodshed. I made that decision so as to draw the readers into the middle of the action immediately. I wanted readers to care about Maybelline and see her at a traumatic moment that shaped her in ways that are yet to be seen. Maybelline goes through a lot as a child. And like the stories of Black women who worked as maids, the stories of children who experience adverse childhood experiences are often overlooked, especially now. We like to think of kids as smiling and happy and playing without a care in the world, but that's not everyone's reality. A number of studies have been conducted in recent years showing the connection between adverse childhood experiences and future health prospects. A test commonly known as the ACEs test has been developed to help explore this link. It's been found that the rougher your childhood, the higher your score is likely to be, and the higher your risk for later health problems. This illustration shows that there are 3 types of ACEs: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. Maybelline experiences several of these before she turns 18. These experiences put her at risk for a variety of adult conditions, ranging from increased headaches to depression to heart disease. What these graphs don't show, though, is that racism and discrimination are also adverse childhood experiences and can have a negative impact on how a child develops. I want to make one point crystal clear here. This is not a book about a broken family and the cultural deficits of Black families in general. This is a book about our country's long history of systemic racism and our refusal to grapple with the insidious impact of white supremacy on all of our lives. Aside from taking the fiction writing class, one of the other highlights of our year at Harvard was meeting Dr. Jack Shankoff of the Center for the Developing Child. A lot of the work around ACEs was in its infancy when we were on campus, and Dr. Jack made time to meet with me to discuss my interest and what I could do to counteract negative influences on children's lives. He told me to focus on relationships and to keep in mind that just one safe, stable relationship could make a major difference. I have kept that in mind in my work with the Freedom Readers After School and Summer Literacy Program, which celebrated its 10th anniversary recently. Our goal is to support families, and especially families of color, as they navigate a sometimes hostile and often confusing parenting landscape. Dr. Jack's words also prompted me to make sure that Maybelline had someone in the novel who was her advocate. However, that situation is a complicated one because her advocate had also committed a violent act. Here is where the novel raises questions about the justifiability of violence. Can it be used as a tool of progress and positive change? Is violence ever a benefit to our community? There is a point in the novel where it shifts and we see Maybelline approaching adulthood, having been shaped by forces beyond her control. Readers root for her to triumph and find a measure of success, but the odds are stacked against her, as they are stacked against the majority of Black families at that time. There are some in our community right now who believe that the end of enslavement meant that Blacks in Georgetown County were free to pursue life, liberty, and happiness to the same degree as the white slaveholding families that kept them in chains for hundreds of years. Nothing could be further from the truth. After slavery ended, Jim Crow laws, discriminatory credit policies, combined with restricted covenants, kept Black people impoverished. Right now, today, we are wrestling with the consequences of the slavery era. The wealth gap between white and Black families is a prime example. The typical white family has wealth of $171,000. This is nearly 10 times greater than the $17,150 for an average Black family. Put another way, the typical Black household remains poorer than 80% of white households. Let those numbers marinate for a second. Many economists believe that it is this income inequality, along with police brutality, that is driving the civil unrest that we've seen across the country and the globe this year. Now take those statistics and set them down inside the COVID era and add them to the context of adverse childhood experiences. Now we have a perfect storm for Black and brown communities to have higher rates of infection and death caused by the coronavirus. From the CDC website, updated on July 24, 2020, this is a quote. "There is increasing evidence that some racial and ethnic minority groups are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Inequities in the social determinants of health, such as poverty and healthcare access, affecting these groups are interrelated and influence a wide range of health and quality of life outcomes and risks. To achieve health equity, barriers must be removed so that everyone has a fair opportunity to be as healthy as possible." End quote. So in order to fully understand the world as Maybelline experiences it, there are 4 lessons with which I would like to leave you. One is a vocabulary lesson, one is another look at statistics, and the final 2 take a look at similar portrayals of Black maids in the South. Let's begin with our vocabulary word for today. Can you say intersectionality? If you haven't heard the term, this 3-minute video produced by Teaching Tolerance will help you to gain a good understanding of the forces shaping Maybelline's reality in the 50s and 60s.
Intersectionality. Have you heard this word before? Even if you have, you might not know what it means. Let's take a look at it. The first part's easy enough. Intersection, a place where things come together. Intersectionality refers to the reality that we all have multiple identities that intersect to make us who we are. It also gives us a way to talk about oppressions and privileges that overlap and reinforce each other. This term dates back to the 1980s and legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. She noticed that we didn't have an effective way to talk about how the experiences of Black women are different from the experiences of Black men and of white women. How? Black women endure both gender discrimination and racial discrimination. Over the last 30 years, scholars, educators, and activists have expanded the use of the word intersectionality to talk about identities beyond race and gender. Let's look at a few examples. Jerry has a disability, and his family lives below the poverty line. He is the oldest of 10, which requires him to do a lot of caregiving, and sometimes keeps him out of school. No one in the school counseling office has talked to Jerry or his parents about his plans for after graduation. He has applied for several jobs, but never gets called back. Fatima is Muslim and recently came to the United States from Somalia. She finds that many people at her school make assumptions about her values and abilities before they speak to her. Many of her classmates think she shouldn't be at their school at all. Greta comes from an affluent family. Both her parents and grandparents went to college, and her father owns a successful business. She doesn't think about her identity very often, but she does think of herself as someone who will go to college and get a good job once she graduates. Think about Greta's situation as opposed to Fatima's or Jerry's. Fatima and Jerry are members of marginalized groups. They don't get to choose whether or not to think about their identities. Greta, on the other hand, can ignore intersectionality if she wants to. Life isn't the same for everyone, even for people who share identity characteristics. By adopting an intersectional lens, we have a better opportunity to understand why and to change the institutions that help and harm us based on who we are. Want to learn more? Read our story, Teaching at the Intersections, in the summer 2016 issue of Teaching Tolerance magazine.
Now, keeping the idea of intersectionality in mind, let's consider the race and gender gap. Go back, yeah. A Black woman would have to work until September 1st to make the same amount of money that the average white man made the entire year before. Now let's turn our attention to one of Maybelline's cousins, so to speak. In preparation for this talk, I realized that they have similar names. The Help features a character named Abeline in the book, which was published in 2009, and the movie released in 2011. There's been quite a bit of controversy surrounding the story over the years, and people of all races and backgrounds have voiced differing opinions. It raises questions about who is qualified to tell the stories of people who have been marginalized, and questions whether or not the voice of the story's white hero is given more power and prominence than the women who actually worked in the kitchens and raised the babies. The actress who portrayed Abeline in the movie expressed regret over accepting the role in an interview she gave to Vanity Fair in 2008. Here is Viola Davis's take.
I don't want to leave you, but it's time for me to retire. You're my last little girl.
No! Viola Davis has revealed that she regrets starring in the 2011 film The Help. The Academy Award-winning actress made the confession while answering readers' questions as part of a story for the New York Times published on Tuesday, explaining that the film is included on a list of projects she wished she never did. Set in Mississippi during the civil rights movement in the 1960s, The Help tells a story of an aspiring author, Skeeter Phelan, played by Emma Stone, who decides to write a book from the point of view of African American maids that work for white families. According to Davis, I just felt that at the end of the day that it wasn't the voices of the maids that were heard. I know Aibileen, I know Minnie, they're my grandma, they're my mum, and I know that if you do a movie where the whole premise is I want to know what it feels like to work for white people and to bring up children in 1963, I want to hear how you really feel about it. I never heard that in the course of the movie. The actress who played maid Aibileen Clark clarified that her regret of working on the film has nothing to do with the cast or crew. The friendships that I formed are ones that I'm going to have for the rest of my life, she said. I had a great experience with these other actresses who are extraordinary human beings. Octavia Spencer, Bryce Dallas Howard, Jessica Chastain, and Allison Janney also appeared in the film. The actress also added that she could not have asked for a better collaborator than director and writer Tate Taylor. The film was nominated for a number of awards, including Best Picture at the 84th Academy Awards. Davis was also nominated in the Best Actress category, while her co-stars Spencer and Chastain were both included in the Best Supporting Actress category, with Spencer taking home the statuette. To read more on this story, head to thr.com. For The Hollywood Reporter News, I'm Lindsay Rodriguez.
Although Maybelline and Aibileen can be considered literary cousins, there are a few stark differences in the way the two stories are told. In Riverside Blues, all of the black characters speak for themselves. They tell their own stories in their own voices. And Maybelline's perspective is always centered, and her voice is always amplified. The final lesson brings us to the present moment in the case of the palmetto cheese. Just days ago, the mayor of Pawleys Island, which is in Georgetown County, posted on his Facebook page that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. As a result, many have boycotted the products made and distributed by the mayor's company's family. I personally do not like pimento cheese at all, but I found it quite interesting that a picture of a Gullah woman who worked for the mayor's family is featured prominently on the package. Her name is Vertrella Brown, and according to the website, where the text from the screen comes from, Brown passed away in April of this year. I'd like to offer my condolences to her family. The website says she did the early work of preparing and serving the family's pimento cheese recipe. But I can't help but wonder, and I am not alone, if she was ever fully and fairly compensated for the use of her image and the idea that led to the name of palmetto cheese as the pimento cheese with soul. This marketing led some consumers to believe that they were supporting a black-owned business with their purchase. Recent events have proved that this assumption was dead wrong. It's moments like these that make people stop whatever they're doing and take to the streets and protest. These are the incidents that cause us to proclaim that Black Lives Matter. And although it's a different case entirely, Breonna Taylor was murdered by police while she was in bed and no one has been held accountable. Black lives matter. Black women matter. They deserve justice. Let's demand that on their behalf. Ms. Brown, on the website here, is also referred to as a dear personal friend of the Henry family. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard people in this area who grew up here explain that their maids were just like family or a literal part of the family. But one blogger takes a different take. She says, "Have you ever thought about the fact that the woman you called Odessa was the same woman my friends called Mrs. Singley? That she supported a family on the $6 in bus fare, 50 cents round trip your grandmommy was paying her? That the woman you call your best friend was 40 years your senior and had another whole life of dignity, hopes, and dreams that had nothing to do with being in service to you and grandmommy? That maybe Odessa didn't like you as much as felt sorry for you because you were the baby of the family, the one your brother and sister slapped around, the one they were always leaving behind. You ever thought of that?" I'm proud to say that Riverside Blues tells the other side of the story. It humanizes the women who carried the world on their backs and carried half the sky. It allows them to be complicated and flawed and brilliant. It allows them to fall in love and be hurt and get lost in the pages of a book. Riverside Blues will open windows onto a whole new world for some and hold a mirror up for so many others. So I'll end this right where I started. I won't deny that these are troubling and challenging times, but I want to remind you that there is hope. In the novel, Maybelline suffers through many hard times, but she does not succumb to the pressures. She does not bow, and she does not bend. Neither should we. A rainbow coalition of young people is out there on the front lines, sacrificing a great deal to move this country forward. They are showing us by example that this is not the time to back off of what we know is right. I'll leave you with the words of Toni Morrison because they inspire me on a daily basis. I know that Maybelline would approve this message. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, and no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. Thank you for making time and room for this discussion today. Be encouraged and be blessed. One final thought: to get copies of Riverside Blues mailed to you, all you have to do is send a check or money order for $17 to P.O. Box 30548, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina 29588, or you can cash at me at $Tracy S. Bailey. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tracy, and we'll give a round of applause in studio here.
Thank you.
So it's a quiet round of applause, relatively. Thank you so much for that. And as usual, we did not have any questions so far, although we might get some coming in afterwards. Folks are shy. When we did a whole series of 10 lectures right up to last Tuesday, the DigiBridge series, and I think folks are a little bit, they're still getting used to the format of asking questions online. So hopefully there'll be some questions rolling in. Typically once I get up here, there might be a question or two. But
Okay.
But yeah, you gave us a lot to think about and hopefully talk about even afterwards. And I did want to say thanks again to our friends of the Waccamaw Library, FAL, and thanks to Linda Ketron, a great friend who did, she's in charge of Class Publishing, which did publish Riverside Blues.
Absolutely.
And that's where, that made this thing possible. These words that you put together, you do language, and this wonderful writer, Toni Morrison, that is how civilizations heal. Mm-hmm. Although a lot of what you're saying, sometimes, and your novel starts with a scene of violence and trauma. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you gotta break things open, break the ice, maybe open a wound in order for things to open up. Something has to be broken and open in order to be open, in order to heal later on. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be the point. Yeah. So, yeah, what about, you started by saying, by all means, let's connect. And could you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I'm just really interested in people's insights and in their understandings and their observations when they read the novel, because I've come to learn that what I've placed on the page isn't really the meaning, but the meaning takes place somewhere between the page and the reader. So it's always fascinating to me to hear what people have to say and the things that really stuck with them after they read the novel.
So your intention, you have your ideas, you put them in the words, and there's almost it's almost like the reader co-creates the work
Absolutely.
in their own head, and so it's a real process. You write it, you put it out there, but you need a reader to complete the process, and they have other ideas,
Right.
you know, and it's a kind of dialogue. And I think Toni Morrison, great, wonderful American writer, African American female writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature,
Yeah.
among many great honors, and she passed away last year. We lost her, but
We did.
so yeah, that writing is a dialogue. A novel is a way to connect. It's not just, you don't just write it and that's that. All right, how about this is from Jeff Brandsburg. So we did have a question
Hi, Jeff
coming out there. And do you think, you talked about intersectionality.
Yes.
Sounds like a big word, but we had I think a clear definition out in the video. Do you think intersectionality subsumes stereotypes? Do you think intersectionality subsumes stereotypes?
So this is a great question from my very intellectual friend, Jeff Brandsburg in Rhinebeck, New York, actually. So, Jeff, I'm going to really be thinking about this question for a while, but I'll have to say that I do not think that intersectionality subsumes stereotypes. I know that stereotypes definitely still exist, and they still need to be confronted, and they need to be unpacked. And I think that intersectionality is a way for us to really avoid those stereotypes and understand how harmful that they can be for people as we begin to look at the pressures that are applied to, you know, people from a lot of different perspectives. So we looked at Maybelline and talked about the intersection of race and gender. And once we look at all of those things in context, then we can avoid stereotypes and see people as complete human beings, I think.
Okay, all right. So it's a way of intersectionality is described as a lens, I think you said, a way of seeing or re-seeing, and it can help pick apart those stereotypes.
Absolutely.
And you did say, you know, it's a way, sometimes the stereotypes for some categories are helpful, you know, for certain groups, they can be helpful, but certainly are harmful for, you know, the majority of groups. So, but it is a way of exposing those, and hopefully you can move past them.
Right.
And see the great commonalities between people as opposed to the divisions.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Jeff Brandsburg.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jeff, for that question. Yeah, and how, so one thing that seemed to show up in your talk was The Help, you know, 2009, the movie and the novel, and it's a very popular novel, but also very controversial. And it seemed maybe that Riverside Blues, your novel, was in some ways kind of a response to that. Maybe not entirely consciously, but it does. You seem to pitch that as an alternative approach. Would you? How would you respond to that? Do you think it's
it definitely wasn't conscious. It wasn't an intentional move on my part. As I said in the talk, I started writing this book when we were away spending a year in Boston, Massachusetts. And it wasn't until I got to Boston during the middle of the polar vortex that I really was able to appreciate my love for Georgetown County.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience, but I was surrounded by strangers. I didn't really know anyone beyond our family. So writing these stories really connected me in a spiritual way to home. So I think that just the knowledge of what people in my family have gone through, just the stories of having them ride the bus all the way from Georgetown to Myrtle Beach to work in hotels, those things started coming out and comforted me when I was away. So I would say that, you know, Catherine Stockett had to write what she knew when she wrote The Help, and that's exactly what I did. I wrote what I knew.
You write what you know.
Yeah.
And yet you also kind of push the boundaries as well. You start from a place that you know, but you also invented, you go back, you weren't writing, present day, you went back into the past
Right.
with your novel. So you also stretched the limits of, you knew the place, you grew up Georgetown County native, and you were sort of yearning for that, being in the polar vortex among strangers up
Right.
in the cold gray north in around Cambridge, Massachusetts there. But how about, what made that decision to go back in time in your novel? Why did you sort of go back? Although well, let's start with that. You went
Okay.
back in time, but it does, you say, relate to present day.
Absolutely,
as well.
and that was the reason that I wanted to go back in time. I've always been very fascinated with history, especially growing up in a place so rich in history. I think my house where I grew up is about a 10-minute drive away from the place where one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence lived. And I didn't know that until I was an adult. So when I got this assignment in the fiction writing class to try to see the world from the perspective of a 6-year-old, and started thinking about how my mother must have seen the same things that I saw when I was growing up, I just really liked going in that direction and liked being able to show the connection between some of the things that the challenges that we face as a community now. I mean, all those things are rooted in that time, and that time is rooted in a time before that.
Yeah. And so the title of your talk, it's not unrelated to current situations at all.
Absolutely.
And so you're connecting that up to Black Lives Matter protest today. So even though, and you can go even deeper into the past, as you're saying, and we just had 10 lectures that went, going back to 400 years ago,
right,
to the present. So there is that deep history all through Georgetown County, but there are those wonderful connections that we have, and but you were able to bring together a more recent past, 50s and 60s. But you are writing about the times today as well.
Right, and another thing is the fact that these women are still with us. They're still alive.
Yeah.
So we should not miss the opportunity to let them know how important their contributions were to the shaping of this county, of this nation, and of our lives. So this gives us an opportunity to give them their flowers while they're still here.
And we talked, I keep mentioning it's still on my brain, but these live streams, we talked about a lot of notable Georgetonians and Black Georgetonians. But one thing I think running through your talk today and the novel, it sounds like that there are a lot of unsung heroes.
Absolutely.
And one of those, you mentioned the I believe it was Jack Shankoff. Up at Harvard at the Center for on the Developing Child. But it takes one person potentially who's an advocate for a child, and maybe a strong Black mother, a strong a female presence in a child's life that could really turn around that child's life, who's suffering from a lot of other pressures out there. That might not make it into the history books
Right.
officially.
But it's so important.
It's crucial, and
Yeah.
it turns around a life from going down a bad path into something, that's really productive. But that's crucial, and that might not make it into the history books.
But these women are the cornerstone of our society. There'd be no history books without them.
It's crucial.
So, yes.
And it has been traditionally underappreciated. It's
And
just
overlooked.
something you do on the side, and you certainly don't get compensated for it financially.
Right.
Being a housewife, a mother, and so it's. But it made it. That's the sort of stuff that's made it into this book, not the history books, but it's a narrative that you tell.
Yes.
That it's a strong force for good. So that in that way, maybe the personal becomes political. So I think that's. I don't know if we have any more. We're clear on the questions out there. They may, and they can get in touch with you, because I have a feeling folks will want to continue the conversation. And one thing, as we said, they can get the novel.
Yeah.
And can you just give that ordering information real quick again?
Okay. The novel is also available at Artworks at the Litchfield Exchange.
Yes.
Linda has a whole box of signed copies there if you want to get one. But if you'd like a book autographed specifically to you, you can just send me a check or money order to P.O. Box 30548, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina 29588. Or if you're really tech savvy and you're into the current money exchange online, you can go to Cash App and find me at $Tracy, Tracy S. Bailey, Bailey.
Okay. All right, great. So I think you can be part of the conversation, as we talked about, the literary conversation, with Tracy, and kind of do a mind meld by reading this novel and see what you think. And by all means, let's connect that way. And of course, Tracy continuing the good work with Freedom Readers.
Yes.
Throughout the COVID situation. So that's another whole thing that she's doing with the community to be an advocate and help out. And her husband, we should say, for FOWL members out there, you may remember, I'm sure if you were there, you do remember, Isaac Bailey gave a wonderful talk for us. It's been a little while now, a little ways back, but a couple of years ago. But he's got a new book coming out too, so we can give him a little press, I guess, too.
One of my favorite things to do is give my husband a plug.
Yeah.
Many of you have read My Brother Moochie, and that's the book
Yeah.
he talked about when he was here before. But on October 6th, Why Didn't We Riot? A Black Man in Trumpland will be released, and it is now available for pre-order on Amazon.
Okay. So that's coming up. So the Baileys are, always busy writing, and their daughter is she's written at least one co-written a children's book as well, I know.
She was the co-author.
Co-author.
She was a strong contributor.
Yeah.
She's not the lead writer, but she's working on it.
Yeah. So they're always writing and contributing. So more you won't lack for a Bailey book on your bookshelf. So thank you so much. Great start to the FOWL First Thursday series. Much appreciated. And thank you so much, Dr. Tracy Bailey, here with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.